had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, "So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life like the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." Then he was afraid. He got up and fled for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. He left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked that he might die. "It is enough now, O Lord. Take away my life, for I am no better than my ancestors." He got up and ate and drank. Then he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. At that place he came to a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." He said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." Then the Lord said to him, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael as king over Aram. Also you shall anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, as king over Israel. And you shall anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat of Abel-Meholah, as prophet in your place. Whoever escapes from the sword of Hazael, Jehu shall kill. And whoever escapes from the sword of Jehu, Elisha shall kill. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. In the part of the story that Amanda read, Elijah has life all figured out. Did you notice? He knows just the right answer. He says, "Hey, Ahab, you have gone astray by following Jezebel's gods. But I've got God on my side, and I can show you. Here is what we are going to do to solve your problem of not knowing who to worship. Gather all the prophets of Baal and get them together on Mount Carmel. We will have 2 bulls for a burnt offering, and whichever God brings fire on the offering will be proven as the one true God." So that is what they did. And Elijah, in control of the situation, had the prophets of Baal go first. The 450 of them spent hour upon hour praying and crying out to the Baals, cutting themselves to let their blood flow. And Elijah stood off on the side, taunting them. "Cheer louder. Maybe your God can't hear you. Dance harder. Cut yourselves some more. Come on, guys. Where is your God's fire?" But no fire came. Then it was Elijah's turn. He prepared the bull and put it on the altar. And then to go along with the taunting. He had the spectators go and get buckets full of water and pour it on top of everything. It was all soaked. Then he prayed to God. Fire came down and consumed everything. Even the water was gone. And then, having proven who is the one true God, Elijah had the people gather up all those prophets and killed them. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, "By tomorrow I will do to you what you have done to all these people." Clearly, she supported retributive violence and taking justice into her own hands. Ahab supported his wife, and Elijah, that confident, the guy in control, he runs away. In our story, we find him sitting alone under a tree out in the wilderness, saying, "Oh, poor me, I'm all alone. I'm the last prophet left. I'm the only righteous person in the land." He feels mighty sorry for himself. And God says, "Get up. What are you doing? Go and stand on that mountain." And after a great wind and an earthquake and a fire and silence, God asks again, "What are you doing here?" And I hear God with an exasperated voice saying, "Come on, you are not the only one left, and I really don't care. It doesn't matter even if you are the only one left. I have work for you to do." God reminds Elijah of his call. The implication is that whether or not Elijah thinks he is in control, or if he thinks he's the only righteous person left, or if he feels like he just can't do anything else, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that God has a job for Elijah. God called him. God commissioned him to go and anoint some other people that God named, proving that God is in control and Elijah is not alone. God is in control. We are not alone. God has work for us to do. That's the message of this story. So the question is, how do I preach this text the Sunday after yet another violent attack and shooting? This time in Orlando, there were 49 victims dead, with many more wounded, physically and emotionally. So how do I stand up here and preach a message that God is in control and that we are not alone and that God has work for us to do? How do I preach that without sounding trite or as if there's a simple answer? Elijah had just finished making an offering to God and calling on God to prove to the people who is the one true God. And then he killed 450 people. Elijah, the prophet who was on top of the world, commanding people, taunting his enemies, relishing in his confidence in God. And then Elijah dealt with difference by murder. Just like Jezebel, he planned retributive violence and took justice into his own hands. And yet we still like to think about Elijah as the good guy and put him up on a pedestal. After that event, Elijah's confidence turned to despair and depression. He went off alone and he begged for death. And God said, "Get up and move forward. What are you doing sitting under this tree waiting to die? I have need of you." In the days that have followed last week's shooting, voices called out, "Where are you, God?" And other voices, maybe even louder, cried out with answers to the question, why? Terrorism, lack of gun control, homophobia, fear, religion, racism. The first answer I heard to the question why was terrorism. People said the shooter was a terrorist who allied himself with the Islamic State. But as the story unfolded, we learned he was an American, born and raised, one of us. Shouldn't he have been a good guy? Then I heard the answer that it was because he had a gun, that he shouldn't have had a gun, that we need a list of all names to keep people from getting guns. And wherever you stand on gun control, it's clear that we need to accept and address the fact that we have an issue. Next, I heard that this was a hate crime caused by homophobia. And in this instance that I heard, the implication was made that somehow the victims brought this violence upon themselves by being gay. Now, regardless of what you believe, I don't think you can say that we don't have issues. The humanity of people and blaming victims for crimes are issues we need to deal with. I also heard that this happened because the shooter was Muslim. One of our political candidates even used this to make the point that no Muslims should be allowed to come into this country, forgetting that this is their country too. Or what if we look at the fact that the victims of this crime are mainly Latino? Their skin may look different than mine in many cases, and their heritage is different than mine. Racism is a real issue. We have so many issues that we explain away, and we say, oh, that's not really the issue. It's not really about terrorism or homophobia or racism or guns, people will say. But when we explain away all of the issues, we're left with a violent crime that is caused by none of them, or maybe by all of them. I don't have answers. I wish I did, but I know that God has called us here. And we can try and explain away all of the isms, or we can confront them and deal with them. And we can listen, and we can live into God's commission for us to go and to do and to be. Violence is not the end. It's time to change our reaction to it. We can't point to all of the isms and all of the issues and then let them off the hook. We need to own that these are important issues, that we have problems, and that we are not the people that we want to be or even claim to be. In this place, God says to us, I am not done with you. What are you doing here? Go and do, because I am telling you to. The myth that he was in control didn't work for Elijah, and it won't work for us. The wimpy, oh, poor me method didn't work for Elijah either, and it won't work for us. Following God and doing what he was commissioned to do is how Elijah moved forward. And it's how we must move forward. 50 people are dead, and we can't change it. And we could gather on one side and give answers because we believe that God is on our side. Or we could crawl off into a hole and say there's nothing we can do and pray for death. But neither method works, and both methods are wrong. We are called, we are commissioned, and we are sent out. Our commission is to live without fear. It is our job. It is our calling to go forward as God leads. Not to hide in the shadows, to wait for death. And not to be yelling at people, telling them we have the right answers. We cannot let our isms off the hook. We need to engage and then move forward as God leads. And that takes prayer. So please pray with me. God of